Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 27. And it is Wednesday, March 1st, 2024. So if you're joining for the first time, glad to have you here. Go ahead and grab a snack or a drink before we continue, and then we'll jump into the content. So if you've had enough time to do that, let's go ahead and hop on over to my screen and jump into the content. All right, so first article here, Philadelphia Inquirer says data of over 25,000 people stolen in 2023 breach. The daily newspaper of Philadelphia Inquirer revealed that attackers behind a May 2023 security breach have stolen the personal and financial information of 25,549 individuals. That's quite a bit, right? In May 2023, the Inquirer disclosed that its systems were breached in a cyber attack detected after its content management system went down unexpectedly. In response, the news organizations took some computer systems offline to contain the security breach and hired Kroll forensics experts to investigate the anomalous activity. The attack disrupted the publication of the print newspaper, with home delivery subscribers asked to catch up with the latest news using the newspaper's website, Inquirer.com, which remained unaffected. There's a quote here. It says, "We determined that an unauthorized party gained access to our systems, and certain files were viewed and or copied from our systems between May 11th, 2023 and May 13th, 2023. So this, first of all, one of the things that comes up with this is in your organization, when you have a cyber breach, when you have an attack, you get hacked, anything like that, how do you handle that, right? How do you respond to that? What kind of processes do you have in place? What kind of plans do you have in place? All of those things matter. What does your incident response process look like? What does your business continuity process look like? What does your disaster recovery process look like, right? Because when things happen, that is not the time to decide what you need to do, right? That is actually the worst time to decide what you need to do, because you're going to do it based on emotion and based on what you feel at the time, not a well thought out process or plan to actually do the things you need to do. You also will prioritize the different processes and act accordingly to that, right? So that prioritization is really important in that whole plan and process of that. While the Inquirer didn't reveal the nature of the attack, the Cuba ransomware gang claimed responsibility 1 week after the incident. So they're claiming it pretty quickly, right? 1 week. The ransomware group claimed they stole financial documents, correspondence with bank employees, balance sheets, tax documents, compensation, and source code from Inquirer's compromised servers. Cuba also published the files on its dark web leak site, indicating that the newspaper refused to pay a ransom, that the extortion attempt reached a dead end. So when you get breached, right, one of the things that you need to understand is what kind of data do you have? Where is that data stored? Ideally, you want to know, did that actually get accessed, right, by the attackers? And so if you can identify that it did or didn't, that certainly is very helpful. But when you start talking about like sensitive data, so things like balance sheets or personal information about employees, tax documents, compensation, all of those kinds of things, right? That is all kind of sensitive data that has to be handled accordingly and responded to accordingly. Sometimes with certain types of data, you have these notifications or breach notification requirements that you have to notify people if so many records were affected or if certain kinds of data was affected. And so you have to be aware of what your actual requirements are for that stuff. So very important in the cybersecurity world, and if you work in this world or creating policies and things like that. All right. Next article here, millions of Docker repos found pushing malware to phishing sites. 3 large-scale campaigns targeted Docker hub users sure it says Docker Hub, but Docker users planting millions of repositories that pushed malware and phishing sites since early 2021. As JFrog security researchers found, around 20% of the 15 million repositories hosted by Docker Hub, of course, yeah, there we go, contain malicious content ranging from spam to dangerous malware and phishing sites. The researchers discovered almost 4.6 million repositories containing no Docker images, which couldn't be run using a Kubernetes cluster or a Docker engine, so they were completely fake, and linked approximately 2.81 million to 3 large malicious campaigns. So there's kind of this trend here that's being identified. Each of these campaigns use different tactics to create and distribute the malicious repositories. The downloader and ebook phishing campaigns created fake repositories in batches, while the website SEO campaign, which was another campaign, created a few repositories daily and used a single user repository. The downloader campaign contained automatically generated text with SEO text prompting pirated content or cheats for video games and links to the software. So that's a pretty common way why people get breached, is because they're trying to get cheats, they're trying to get hacks, they're trying to do something, and you get breached, right? That's pretty common, right? People want free stuff, people want cheats, people want hacks. JFrog suspects that this may be part of a larger malware operation, which could involve adware or monetization schemes that targeted devices infected after installing third-party software. The ebook phishing campaign created nearly 1 million repositories, offering free ebook downloads and containing randomly generated descriptions and download URLs. After promising a full free version of an ebook, the website redirects the targets to a phishing landing page asking them to enter credit card information. Unlike typical attackers, and this is a quote, typical attacks targeting developers and organizations directly, the attackers in this case tried to leverage Docker Hub's platform credibility, making it more difficult to identify the phishing and malware installation attempts, JFrog added. So this reminds me a lot of the scenario where we talked about on this show about GitHub and Microsoft repositories, right? Going after a trusted name, somebody that everybody, trusts and believes in, or will actually, download their software and not really think about it. But this is the same kind of thing, right? And I think as a provider of these kind of services or download abilities or products or anything like that, you need to be thinking about that for your customers, right? And for how you're protecting that, how you're preventing that, how you are maintaining legitimacy in what you're providing, right? So as just a company, what if your brand gets damaged, right? You have this kind of brand reputation damage, and you have to understand how that affects your whole business. There are things related to brands or your reputation that can completely decimate or destroy your company, right? That can put you out of business if it's severe enough, or certain kinds of things, and then people just won't trust you. And then over the long term or short term, right, depending on how catastrophic it is, that could certainly put you in a world of hurt as far as being a business. So that is definitely a very valid thing. Next article here: NSA staffer who tried failed to spy for Russia gets 21 plus years. A former NSA employee has been sentenced to 262 months in prison for attempting to freelance as a Russian spy. In his trial yesterday, Jariah Sebastian Dalk pleaded guilty to 6 counts of attempted transmission of top secret information to a foreign agent, as announced by the U.S. Department of Justice. He had worked at the NSA as an information systems security designer for just under a month from June to July 2022, making quick work of the short period by accumulating top secret documents with National Defense Information, NDI. Between August and September that year, shortly after leaving the NSA, Dalk made contact with a person he thought was a Russian agent. To prove his legitimate access and willingness to share, and that's a quote, he then emailed the apparent spy snippets of 3 top secret classified documents with NDI. Dalk then said he'd be willing to sell the full documents and more for just $85,000. Keep that in mind, $85,000. This is not like $10 million for for a top secret document, $85,000, right? That's under a lot of what a lot of people make in tech, especially in cybersecurity and some of these high profile kind of areas. Only there was one problem. He was only talking to an FBI agent, an undercover agent. No big deal, right? You got caught, you got busted. And this happens all the time, right? You, as an employee, as somebody with a clearance, you are not smarter than you think you are, or that you think, some of these controls and measures are in place. You will get busted. They will find out who you are. And almost always, these people are brought to some kind of justice. So be very cautious if you have access to this kind of content, this kind of material, these kind of documents. If you have a clearance, just do the right thing. Of course, the FBI agents said was not his friend, and this is in the article, and the whole thing was a sting operation, and the former NSA employee was arrested just after he sent the classified materials. Dalk pleaded guilty from the outset. No! Of course, you're guilty. You're guilty. Sentencing law is somewhat complex, but assuming Dalk can't serve any of his counts concurrently, which means at the same time, and that he doesn't get out early, he'll be getting out in January 2046, and he'll be 53 or 54. So that's a pretty substantial amount of time in prison if he can't serve them concurrently. Typically, what happens with a lot of sentences, and why that's an important distinction, is because you do see judges and these sentences, they are deemed as where you can concurrently serve them, basically, right? You can serve them at the same time. So if you had, let's say, 5 20-year sentences and you could serve them concurrently, then you would serve like 20 years as a whole, right? Just 20 years in total, because they're counting all of it for each of those sentences. When they don't do that, that's a severe penalty, right? That just stacks them on top of each other, because essentially you have to finish one, then you have to finish another, then you have to finish another, and you have to finish them in a row instead of at the same time. So really simultaneously, right? So don't do that stuff. You're going to get caught. You're going to have to face justice, and nobody will be sad for you, right? They'll just, they'll be glad that you got penalized for doing things that you know you weren't supposed to do. Next article, wireless carriers face $200 million FCC fine as data privacy waters roil. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, has fined the top U.S. wireless carriers a collective $200 million for sharing access to customers' locations information without consent, the culmination of an action proposed 4 years ago as authorities continue to grapple with how to reel in companies' handling of sensitive personal data. This is pretty big news, right? Specifically, FCC fined Sprint and T-Mobile USA, which have merged since the investigation began, more than $12 million and $80 million, respectively. AT&T more than $57 million, and Verizon almost $47 million. Those are pretty substantial fines, right? The agency proposed the fines in 2020 based on an investigation that started after reports that a Missouri sheriff consistently used a location finding service operated by Citrix, a company that provides and monitors telecommunications services in correctional facilities, to access the location information of the wireless carrier's customers without their consent between 2014 and 2017. So this has been in the news and really a point of controversy for a while, right? The whole idea of these wireless carriers having some of this information and then what they do with it, right? Are they selling it to law enforcement? Are they just giving it to law enforcement? Are they giving it to the government? What are they doing with it, right? How are they providing this information? Are people consenting? Obviously not, apparently, according to this article. Case ultimately revealed that the 4 telecom providers had programs in place at the time that were selling customer location data to 2 data aggregation firms, who then resold the access to the data to other entities. So that is a huge issue, right? We think about something like Facebook several years ago, where they got in a lot of trouble around campaign kind of data, right? It was around election stuff, but they got in a lot of trouble because essentially what was happening is you were on Facebook, you would say, hey, I consent to this application or to sharing my data with this or whatever. And then indirectly, because you consented, they could then access your friend's data and everybody else that you're connected to. So it's a whole big issue, right? So data privacy in general is a concern, right, for everybody. And so when we have these providers that have a lot of this information are just selling it off or sharing it off with governments, with law enforcement, things like that, and you didn't even consent to it or have any say in that, I mean, that's a pretty big concern, right? That is not how we kind of live life in the United States, especially. So, yeah, not good. There's a quote here: our communication providers have access to some of the most sensitive information about us. Absolutely, said FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel in a statement on the fines. These carriers fail to protect the information entrusted to them. Absolutely. And in the United States, we have a little bit more flexible laws on privacy, or had traditionally have, but certainly things are heating up a little bit, right? It also says all the carriers confirmed to Dark Reading that they will go to court to appeal the decision, no surprise, which was based on a provision to the Communications Act of 1934 that requires U.S. wireless carriers to take reasonable steps to safeguard specific customer data, such as location information. Generally, the companies claim the action by the FCC is based on outdated scenarios at the telecom providers that have since been remedied, and they no longer allow third parties to access sensitive data, location-based data. So basically, they're saying, "Yeah, we did it, but we don't do it anymore. We fixed the hole, right? We fixed the gap. We fixed the vulnerability, and so we should be, commended for that, I guess." But yeah, from a business standpoint, keep in mind a lot of these privacy regulations are not going away; they are only getting stronger, and the expectation that you're going to protect data for customers and privacy-related data is only going up. We are only expecting more and more out of you if we're going to give that data. So you need to take that into account in your business practices and processes if you want to keep reputation, if you don't want to get fined, if you want to just have a solid business practice as far as your data consumption and your data storage and data processing, how long you retain that data, right? All this stuff is going to come into play, absolutely. All right, next article here. Change Healthcare hacked using stolen Citrix account with no MFA. United Health confirms that Change Healthcare's network was breached by the Black Cat ransomware gang who used stolen creds to log into the company's Citrix remote access service, which did not have multi-factor authentication enabled. I can't even say it. I'm just like so saddened, right? Like multi-factor authentication, MFA, two-factor authentication, 2FA. We have talked so much about this just so far on this show. And it's crazy how companies do not have multi-factor authentication enabled. I talked about this in a previous episode about why companies haven't even been forcing people that sign up for services or do certain things to set up two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. It's just unexcusable, right? Especially on a lot of the sensitive kind of stuff, houses healthcare data or other kind of sensitive information, privacy information. There's no excuse. The ransomware attack on Change Healthcare occurred in late February 2024, and we talked about a few of these breaches too on the show, leading to severe operational disruptions on Optum's Change Healthcare platform. This impacted a wide range of critical services used by healthcare providers across the U.S., including payment processing, prescription writing, and insurance claims, and caused financial damages estimated at $872 million. That's a lot of money, right? $872 million. Previously, the Black Cat ransomware gang claimed they had received a $22 million ransom payment from United Health, which was stolen from the affiliate who conducted the attack in an exit scam. Shortly after, the affiliate claimed to still have the data and partnered with Ransom Hub to initiate an additional extortion demand by leaking stolen data. Pretty common stuff with ransomware groups, right? In testimony by Andrew Whitty, the CEO confirmed that the attack occurred on the morning of February 21st when the threat actors began encrypting systems and rendering them inaccessible to the organization's employees. While the actual public-facing attack occurred on February 21st, Witte revealed that the attacker had access to the company's network for approximately 10 days before deploying their encryptors. During this time, the threat actors spread through the network and stole corporate and patient data that would be used in their extortion attempts. So keep that in mind. One of the important things here to notice is that they had access for 10 days before this attack happened, right? So 10 days is not that long, right? A lot of times, these attackers might have access for a lot longer than that. They might sit in your network for months. They might sit in your network for years, right? Depending on the kind of data you have, depending on the organization you have, what their motives are, all of those things obviously matter and come into play. But typically, when something happens, or when you notice it at least, that's probably not the first time that they've been there or the first sign that something happened. So it is very, you have to pay attention to indicators, especially early on, because it might be something minor that kind of, raises the red flag, but, that might help you get ahead of the curve on these attacks. So following the attack, the organization's IT team replaced thousands of laptops, rotated credentials, and completely rebuilt Change Healthcare's data center network and core services in just a few weeks. That's a lot of work. Witte states such a task would usually have taken several months. Exactly. So that is a phenomenal amount of work in a short period of time when they knew their backs were kind of against the wall and they had to do this quick, right? Especially all these laptops, redistributing those, reinstalling the operating systems, whatever they had to do, right? Rotating credentials, like all of this stuff just take forever. Although data samples that leaked online contain protected healthcare information, PHI, and personally identifiable information, PII, Witte notes that so far they have seen no evidence of exfiltration of materials such as doctor charts or complete medical histories. So always an interesting process when you get hacked. Again, look at how fast they were able to do the laptop repair and rotating credentials, rebuilding their data center, right? Like that is phenomenal. But that comes down to what kind of plans do you have in place? What kind of processes do you have in place? What does your response look like when you're able to do this stuff or when you get breached, right? The better plans that you have in place, the more you practice them and get ready and make sure people understand what they need to do, right? They need to know what they need to do, need to be trained on it. But the better that you can do that, the better your time there is going to be at whatever company, right? It doesn't matter, because overall, when some of this stuff takes forever, like if you have critical services that take forever to get back online, that could literally take down a company, right? Small company, large company, it doesn't matter. If your, annual revenue is like $12 million, let's say, so you make $1 million a month, and it takes you 4 or 5 months to actually get this stuff back up and running. So that's $5 million basically lost with no profit. Based on your expenses, that might be really bad, right? If you're spending $9 million and you're making $12 million, so you're profiting $3 million, that might be a really bad time over that year. And that might lead to layoffs. That might lead to firing, shutting down branches, shutting down certain locations, whatever, right? These kind of major things. And although you may not be a part of the business team, right? Your stuff, your services, technologies, those things, and the ability to recover directly impacts the success of the company. So it doesn't matter what kind of company you are, you have to do this stuff. And it's part of compliance requirements, part of security best practices, part of IT best practices, right? It's just mandatory stuff. You can't skip out on it. So with that being said, thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel episode number 27. It is Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. And with that being said, I want to thank you for tuning in again, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.